Nosferatu, a symphony of horror. Let's talk about it. So this year's silent film showcase was Nosferatu. This is a 102-ish year old film, which is amazing to think about. And also, it's kind of saddening to me that other films that came out around the same time or earlier, we don't have access to. So I'm thankful that this film exists and that we can check it out and talk about it. It's particularly timely having it come out after, or having it be shown this go around after Robert Eggers' recent remake, which is quite faithful, by the way. I don't think I reviewed it on this channel, but I did review it. I've seen that movie twice, that version twice, and it was very good, very well done. Spiritually, tonally, in keeping with Murnau's version. But I'm glad it's here, and I want to talk about it. So watching a silent film is always an experience, and watching it as you're putting yourself in the mindset of what it would have been like to watch it in the 1920s is kind of cool. And it makes me sad that the theater isn't open more often for things like that. I don't know where you live, but San Jose used to have a fair amount of movie viewing opportunities, and now, particularly the downtown area, it's pretty sparse. There aren't that many. In fact, you can't watch a movie downtown anymore. Just on the off chance, you'd have to either go to the east side of San Jose, to the mall, or Santa Clara, or Milpitas. So there are a handful of places around, and even fewer places that show classic movies, and even fewer that show silent movies. So whenever the opportunity comes up, it's always a cool thing to try and check out. So in viewing the 1922 version of Nosferatu, when I watch these movies, these older movies, especially from the silent era or olden times, I always try to imagine what it might have been like as an audience member at that time to watch that movie and to react the way that you might. I read somewhere that this movie was banned in one place because of how excessively scary it was. It was super scary. And it's just, wow, it's wild but it's wild and it's not. It's wild because if you watch it, it's a very simply put together film, given the technology of the time and what was available and just what they could do and how you could tell the story. You didn't have sound, so you had other ways. You had to figure out other ways to get important things across. But also the other thing is, I would argue that you almost don't need to even have title cards, placards, to understand what's happening. The placards are there just to give you like little details around what's happening, what someone is reading, and what it says, and all. I don't know if it's fully necessary to get the gist of the story, but I want to have a tangent. What I was getting at was the idea that it was so scary that it had to be banned. On one hand, looking at some of those old movies, you can understand why it's so scary. And I think the fact that it's black and white, or not color in the ways that we know it, makes it scarier. You're watching it in a dark theater, and the shadows pop. Look at those shots. There's like it's kind of crazy. So there's an element of it that is scary. Still, right now, more than a century later, it's unsettling. And then there's something about the simplicity of the story and how that it's deceptive. The simplicity of the story makes it feel like this is not that scary. Why are people tripping? Why would you ban this movie? But having watched it again, I could see it. Things weren't as sophisticated as they are now, but for that time, it was sophisticated enough for people to. And then film was still new medium. You didn't really see stuff like that on screen before, so I think that's another thing. Now, the more I'm talking about it, I can understand. Now I go, oh, okay. I suppose if it was a new thing, like it's a new tech, a new magical thing, it's like this mysterious magic that you don't understand, and you're seeing creepy images and things that they look like nightmares. Like Count Orlok looks like something from a nightmare. And then you have other people in the film that have weird expressions on their faces and like bulging eyes. And then the fact that it's black and white makes it scarier because their eyes are darker and things just pop out more. And also the other thing I noticed too was the makeups the actors had to wear so that they could show up on the camera. There's a noticeably lighter, it's almost like they're wearing like mime makeup, pantomime makeup. And I don't know this for sure, but I seem to remember something about this in my film class about why they did that. And it had something to do with how they were being captured on the cameras at the time and the lighting. Certain things needed to be presented a certain way so that they could be picked up by the camera. In any event, that also, the makeup that the actors wore, it does add to the atmosphere and the terror. When they're afraid, it makes us afraid because everything is so over depicted. It's overly depicted. Like someone being scared is not just like how we might do. They're like, it's like super exaggerated. So you look at their face and whatever they're looking at is not the best thing. So I can get behind it. But if you've never seen Nosferatu before, either version, it's about Nosferatu. No, the plot is essentially simple. You have a young land clerk named Thomas, and he's assigned by his employer to collect the deed from a new client named Count Orlok, who is planning on moving into the town that they are living in, that they're from. And so Thomas has to go on this crazy journey to get to Count Orlok's place, get the deed signed, and bring it back, with the understanding that Count Orlok, will eventually move to their town. The wrinkle is that Count Orlok becomes taken with Thomas's wife after seeing her in a locket, and by that point you're aware that there's some fishy things going on with Count Orlok, just because of how he looks and his residence, and things that occur in his conversation with Thomas upon the first meeting. So that's the sort of hook. Unfortunately, what that means for the town Thomas is from, the small German town, is that Count Orlok is bringing with him a lot of darkness, and it doesn't look good for Thomas. It doesn't look good for his wife Nina, or the town at large, and things get a lot worse before they improve. And so that's the general plot of Nosferatu. This is going to be a boring film for a lot of people. Modern audiences, unless you're really a nerd about this kind of stuff, I don't know that you're going to appreciate it too much. Just flat out. Modern audiences are not really going to be with it. It just feels like it could move too slow, with not a lot of things happening action wise, not a lot of movement. Things are things have to happen very strategically, and it's just a different way of viewing movies and stuff. So I think that it's going to be a hard watch for a lot of people. On the other hand, though, if you are a film nerd, or if you care anything, even a sliver about it, there's a lot to be found in this version. So there's two things. One is, I would argue you almost don't need the music because it's constant. Music is constantly happening, and it's, for me, I found it hard to gauge my feelings based on what was happening. Like, I saw what was happening on the screen, and I almost felt like it would be more effective to just have the movie without the music. And I understand that that's not how it was when it was premiered. They had music, live music, which is what happened at Cinequest. The guy plays the sheet music, and that's what's happening. I don't always know, though. The other thing is that whether or not, while we're on the music, I'm always curious around whether or not that music that they're playing live, if that's the actual sheet music that was played when the film was released in the 1920s. I don't know. And you can also find a couple different versions of Nosferatu online somewhere that play with some form of music. Again, I don't know if that's the original music. Either way, part of me wonders whether or not the music is necessary, because it's almost distracting. Because when you look at a scene and maybe something looks like it should be like lower music should be playing, more subtle music should be playing. That's not happening. It's almost like the music is firing on all cylinders almost all the time. And so it's borderline distracting at certain points. But again, as a film nerd, you may not care about that. The other thing that you might note is the set pieces. Because the camera was limited in a lot of ways, there wasn't a lot of movements and camera things you could do like you could now, which means that the set pieces had to be major. They had to mean something. They had to be noticeable in a way that you felt the place, you felt the location, and I think for the most part they are. It's the tricky thing about the set pieces though is whether it's supposed to, whether it's supposed to be night or daytime. Because it's black and white, a lot of the stuff probably had to be shot in the daytime. So you can see where the sunlight is hitting, where the shadows go, and yet you're meant to believe this is nighttime. And if you can switch your brain off a little bit for that, it doesn't matter as much. You can see the locations a lot better. You can see movement, different things. But the set pieces are pretty cool. And there are some camera tricks, camera moves that are noticeable, that are cool, that for the time still you go, oh wow, how did they do that? Where did they set the camera to make it look like this when the ship is going? There's a sequence where the ship that the crew is on the way back to the main town, where the latter half of the film will take place. They are on the way back to the mainland, and there are a couple of shots where the camera is looking off the front of the ship, where the ship is doing all this, and you can see the water over there. Like, oh, how they hold the camera steady enough to do that? Where'd they sit the camera? How'd they do that? Like, so there's a couple shots like that are going to spark some interest if you're a nerd about this stuff, if you care about it. That's the other thing. And then third, there are minimal special effects with like cross dissolves and things that show the power that Nosferatu, or that Count Orlok / Nosferatu possesses. If he's moving from one space to another, sometimes it's almost like he teleports, but there's a cross dissolve that shows this. There are things that explain. There are really cool shadow things too that show his power. Like his hand will do this and then do something like this, but it's his shadow, and he'll take control over someone or do something. It's like it's pretty cool, and I can imagine what it might have been like during that time. And that's like, oh man. Because at that point, you've never seen anything like that before, so I could see how it could be a little bit startling. But as a modern day audience viewer, that's cool to see, and it goes to show how you don't really need a lot to make. It's just a good reminder. You don't need a lot to make a movie, to tell a story. That's all you're doing. If you just whittle it down to the simple action, what are you actually doing? You're just telling a story. So you can have all the crazy effects, all the money, all the tools. You don't actually need all that. They had what they had, and they told an effective story. And it still manages to be chilling. Yeah, so the effects that are on display help that. And then just other stuff that just is miscellaneous things. Like there's a sequence with rats that are there. And you can see, watching this version, you can see like there's so many elements of this movie that Robert Eggers took and expanded. Like, he didn't deviate too far from what the movie actually is, and that's really cool. You can see almost, if you're watching it now, I could see Robert Eggers' movie through this one, even though there are differences. There are some pretty big differences in the limitation, in disposal of different tools that were used to make the movie. Camera stuff, there's tons of stuff. There's tons of differences in that way, but spiritually, they're the same story, and it's cool. It's well done. I think Murnau and his team did a great job for what was there. The other thing that is I think is worthy of note when you consider F.W. Murnau's background. I read somewhere that he was supposed to be into the occult, whatever it is. He and one of his collaborators on this project was into the occult. And so if you're an audience member and you know that, I don't know how many people might have known that, but if you did, it almost, you could argue, this is just me, like, I'm projecting some thoughts on it, but it feels like there's this other element of like darker energy, darker spiritual stuff that might have been sort of imbued onto this movie, which is why it was so scary. Just a thought. I don't know this to be true. I am thankful that the movie is here. It's cool to just see an example of early filmmaking when it was still in its infancy and people were figuring out how to use the medium to tell different types of stories. And this is kind of a supernatural story. This dude who is a vampire, who has like special powers and the power of like, and who's like trying to drink people's blood, taking control over people's minds and stuff. He's like hypnotizing people and stuff. It's actually, it's cool to see how these things are displayed and what the filmmakers used to show that. Yeah, I thought it was cool. If you're curious about Nosferatu, check it out. It's available on YouTube, on like Vizio. It's on Tubi, I believe. It's on several places. So you want to get a feel for what that movie is. And then after that, you might check out the 2024 version, because you might know there are several versions of this movie, different versions. There's the 1922 version here, which itself has several versions. There's the 1976 version. There's the 2024 version, 2020, and then there's another one in between. I feel like there's some other versions up in the mix. So there's tons of versions out there. Definitely though, the most important ones, 1922 and 2024. I feel like, because those are more spiritually linked. I think I feel like they're closely linked. So if you're curious, check it out. I think that's all that's it for this review, or this sort of conversation. Really, it's not really a review. This sort of chat about 1922's Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. I have another screening to go to tonight, and I'm looking forward to that. Gillian Anderson is going to be in town, and she is bringing a movie that she is in, her and Jason Isaacs. I can't remember the name of the movie at the moment, but I'm going to go see it, and there is a follow-up Q&A discussion that I'm excited to sit in on. So stay tuned. Might have some conversation. I'll definitely be talking about the movie on this channel, and we'll see what else comes up after that. But thank you for sticking around, watching this video. I'll be back and see you in the next one.